Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Balanced Life here at Black Star Network. Let me tell you, we've been talking about a lot of things over the last couple of weeks. How do we have faith? How do we walk in our purpose? How do we discover balance in the things that are needed in our lives in order to move us forward? Well, today we're going to talk about one of those things that often paralyzes us from being able to be our best selves. Today, we're talking about fear. Now, I will tell you that there is an acronym that most people have heard, and it is called FEAR, False Evidence Appearing Real. And today, our panel, we're going to begin to talk about that for a little bit because sometimes we can't find balance because we can't get our head on straight. There's a palpitation in our heart. There's something that's going on with us that keeps us from really being able to address those things that will allow us to move forward. So today we are joined by Dr. Jennifer Bishop, Dr. Aaron Bishop, Dr. Terry Whit Bailey, and Dr. Tierney. So all the doctors are in the house today. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, I am so delighted that you all are here to talk about one of the words that often puts us in a space of not knowing what to do and often keeps us from being able to put a plan in place to go forward. So I want to start with the bishops, and either of you can go first. Talk to us a little bit about how we can look at fear from a perspective of helping us versus hindering us.
This is a great topic. Fear is something innately that we are all designed with, right? And so if we look back at times when the fear of knowing that something is coming towards you and you need to be keenly aware of it, knowing that there is something that could be detrimental to you, that is important. So fear is something that can be helpful, but fear also can be paralyzing. And so we have to recognize the difference between the two and how do we use it so that it is to our benefit and not our detriment.
Exactly. Everything she said.
I mean, I think that both of you in stating that, and you approached it in such an interesting way because it was kind of light, it was kind of airy, but oftentimes when we talk about fear, we literally get a knot in our throat. It's almost like somebody gave us a good gut punch and we're like, oh my God, that just literally knocked the wind out of me. So talk to us for just a few minutes, if you will, about the what ifs, because we spend so much time in the what if space till oftentimes that is the thing that gets our head screwed up.
It absolutely is, because instinctually we are finding out whether we're going to take flight or fight, right? Mm-hmm. And that fear is just a thing that makes us understand the power of our awareness. We always talk about on this show and many other platforms about self-awareness. So whenever the power of fear comes along, you need to put yourself in that holding pattern and breathe, examine, find out if there's something that your survival instinct requires you to either fight or take flight. And the beautiful part is, if you choose to fight, you can go into a space of creative leadership or creative power to be a solution to yourself. Because when you are dealing with even fear that leads to a level of anxiety, we're all dealing with anxiety over and over again, but that anxiety can give you a power to be able to take a new assignment or a new opportunity in your life.
And I don't want anyone to think that fear is abnormal. It is a part of something that is built inside of us. We learn that there are things that we should be keenly aware of, again, that will be of your detriment, will be harmful to you. And so you use that to recognize, no, I shouldn't go over there, or there's something that's behind me that I need to be aware of. It's a security as well, but we have to learn how to use it. So again, that it does not take us to a place where we cannot move forward. We need to use it so as an ally and not an adversary.
Excellent.
An ally and not an adversary. And these are times where we try to figure out, as Dr. Tierney always talks about, ways to level up in our lives. And fear can be a stumbling block or a stepping stone. Talk to us about that, Dr. Tierney.
So just some of the practical ways of how we can use fear to be a stepping stone. Jimmy Iovine, who is a music executive, said that fear has a lot of firepower. And if we can figure out how to use that fear to push us from behind instead of stand in front of us, then that's when we're really standing in our power. And so when we hear things like that, and it's like, okay, but I'm afraid right now. So how do I use that to push me from behind instead of stand in front of me? This is what we have to use our fear to inform our next step. So let's say that we are I don't know, fearful of, we just had graduations. So let's say you're feeling fearful of going to college and taking that next step and you don't know what to expect. Well, when we feel that fear, what we can do is say, okay, what exactly am I afraid of? So let me go and talk to some undergraduates, or people who are in college so that I can get some real information about what's happening. False evidence appearing real. We don't know what we don't know. And often what we don't know is what we're afraid of. So using that to actually get the information, get more informed about what that thing is that's kind of hovering in the dark that we're afraid of. Fear is also forget everything and run, and so what we'll often do is we'll forget our teachings, we'll forget what we know, we forget those things that are already ingrained in us and just take off, running. But I want to give you another acronym for fear. Faith, every day, always, right now. When we decide to take our fear and flip that thing over into faith and have faith in what God is doing in our life, faith in our own capabilities, faith in what we already do know and knowing that it's enough, then that helps us to be able to take that next step forward so that that fear doesn't stand in front of us and block us, but actually pushes us forward into our next level.
Being pushed forward is oftentimes something we don't want to do, because when we're standing square in the face of that adversity, the thing that we are, seemingly trying to deal with in some way, shape, form, or fashion, we get into that head space, we get into our feelings and our emotions, and we think back to all of the times when something we thought was going to be wasn't. I want to invite in Dr. Terry Whitt Bailey to talk a little bit about fear and how she works through fear and what it does when she's captivated by it. Hey, Dr. Terry Whitt Bailey.
Well, hello there. Wow, I am already just so well fed with what was already shared today. And one of the things that you said, Dr. Jacquie, that really caught me was that when people are pushed beyond their fear, so when you are pushed, somebody else is there. And many times in fear, we think we're by ourselves and we're frozen or paralyzed. I like to use the word paralyzed when I'm in fearful feelings, in my feelings. I isolate myself. But if someone else is there to push or to prod or to pull or to pray, that is what's going to help to facilitate me beyond that fear. And yes, I've been afraid. And I don't sometimes see it as fear. But then I look back and I say, that's what paralyzed me. It was that I was afraid to do something. And sometimes it does take another person to push or to just make things seem more relevant in the time. Because at that time, it might be something that just I'm not thinking straight. And many of your viewers know that I lost my husband last year. And so as much as I thought I was thinking straight, I'm sure I wasn't thinking straight. And I was paralyzed by a lot of things where I was just fearful to make decisions or fearful to move forward. And I needed that person. God was always there. But there were times when I wasn't listening well enough. In my humanness, I wasn't listening. And so I needed those additional people that I trust. So again, you want to be around those people, especially when you're in a vulnerable state, to be around those people that you trust in order to push you to that next level or push you forward beyond that state of being paralyzed.
Absolutely. I want to invite in Pastor JT to join this conversation, because there are going to be times when you don't know what to do and you don't know who to call on. And Pastor JT brings to us a very unique perspective as it relates to how do we as believers rise to the occasion when we are often paralyzed by fear and facing the unknown. Hey, Pastor JT.
Hey, how you doing, Dr. Jacquie?
We are good.
Man, glad to be back. Man, I missed y'all. But to come back on this amazing topic, fear and faith, and I love the way Dr. Tierney talked about fear, and then had the acronym about faith every day. But that's a challenge, because one of the biggest things that we have to do, even being those that are titled or call themselves believers, is we have to trust him enough in that next step to be sure that whatever that next step is, it's him orchestrating that step. And I think a lot of fear, especially with us as believers, comes from us not being in control. Because if we knew what the outcome was going to be, if we took the next step, we wouldn't have the paralysis of fear, as many of our guests have said today. So I believe that it's that leaning in. If we look at Hebrews, the chapter about faith, the heroes and heroines of faith, and we look at their stories, we always look at their stories in the after. So we hear about what they did after. But if we put some human flesh around that text, there's no way in the world that you can believe that Abraham didn't have a bout with fear, that Moses didn't have a bout with fear. Matter of fact, God talks to Moses while he's staring at the Red Sea and tells him, don't be afraid. But Moses never said, I'm afraid, but God could sense his fear. But the reason why Moses was able to stretch his hand and the children were able to go forth is because even in that moment of fear, God's voice was louder than his fear. So I think that's the challenge. Can we be still enough in that moment of fear, that emotional moment of fear, and allow God's voice to be louder than what we believe may happen, knowing that if we are truly believers, all things going to work out for our good anyway.
I love that perspective. Now, today we're talking about fear and we're giving you acronyms throughout our entire show. We began the first block with fear of being false evidence appearing real. And then Dr. Tierney said, forget everything and run. And that's oftentimes what we do when we are facing fear. But then she also said, faith or faith every day, always right now. Faith every day, always right now. And that's important. You have to include your faith. When we come back after the break, I want to give you another acronym related to fear, and it is literally face every adversity realistically. Fear, face every adversity realistically. Because sometimes we're not truthful with ourselves and cannot be truthful with others. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Black power.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, there are going to be days when we're trying to put it all together. We are in literally already full force in May in our new normal. And so this new normal brings with it some things that we thought we left behind in the past. We're often triggered by things that we thought we were over and done with. But then there are these new challenges because we were not outside, because we were not around other people, because we put our emotions in a bottle and kind of tucked them away in a COVID corner. We didn't work on those things that we thought were necessary because we really weren't sure or certain of what came next. Well, here we are in this space in 2023, really talking about, can we face every adversity realistically? That's another form of fear. We don't have the capacity or the coping skills to face those things that we need. And I want to ask Dr. Tierney about that, because what does it look like trying to cope with the things that we know we are not being realistic or honest about in our lives?
It's very hard to cope or deal with or address the things that we won't first really be real about. If we still are in this delusion of grandeur about what our situation is, what life is, and that could either be that we're making a mountain out of a molehill, or we are imagining what could happen, and we're playing the what if game of what if this happens, what if that happens. But in either one of those scenarios, we're not in the right now. What is actually right now in front of me on my plate, then what that does, it makes us even more anxious, or it can even make us even more depressed. And it's very hard for us to really get a grip on where we are and what's happening, because we're in these two camps. So the first thing that we have to do is really just do some grounding. What is happening right now? And it can be just as simple as, I'm sitting in a yellow chair. I am talking to you right now on this video. Just do some basic grounding techniques that help you to stay right where you are, right in the present. Look at what's happening right now, not what you think will happen, not what it might happen, not what they said that might, not any of that, but just truly what's right here in front of you. And once you do that, you'll find that you'll be calmer. You'll be able to think clearer, because you'll only be facing what's right in front of you instead of what you think might happen, or some things that might have been behind you that are no longer a part of your reality.
I had to pause for a moment, because when you talk about reality, sometimes what I think is real and what is happening in my life and what is going on, because I haven't weighed all the factors that go into it, I'm not really being realistic about what the potential outcome can be. And that could be at the beginning, the middle, and the end. It could also be whether what's up or what's down. Dr. Bishop, talk to us about that for a moment, about being realistic, because even in your work of what's next is now, if we're not realistic about the things that we face and the role that we play in them, we oftentimes can lead ourselves in a misdirection.
So I like to look at it from a perspective, right? So again, fear is tangible at times. It's palpable at times. And what I have done and ask people to do is look at yourself retrospectively and look at what you dealt with that was fearful. And if you could have asked yourself at the age that you are now, the things that you thought were going to cripple you, the things that you thought that you could not overcome or surpass, when you look back at it, and you see that either it didn't happen, or wasn't that bad, or that you stepped out on faith and you continued to walk in spite of what fear may have presented itself to you, you survived. And so another thing that I like to do is I'll talk to my future self, because my future self can give me perspective as to what I may be looking at from this lens of life that I have, and how it may not be as bad as it are. I think it's like 40 or 30% of what we anticipate never happens. And a lot of that is fear. But I'll give this to Bishop after this. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, I did not give you the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And so he's not saying that fear doesn't exist. He says, I just didn't give it to you. And so if we recognize that while fear is and can be used as an ally in one perspective, it also can be an adversary. So perhaps we should stop using the word fear when we're trying to tangibly explain how we feel. Anxiety, we feel paralyzed. When we change the way that we explain what it is, then we can take the power that fear gives and then change our perspective.
Amen. Hey, listen, when she brought up that Bible study about 2 Timothy, I've always loved the study of that scripture, because it says power, love, and a sound mind. And you have to work yourself backwards with that, with sound mind, love, and power. And so when you go from one zone of sound mind, then love, and then power, you're taking each one of those steps towards leveling up, because it's all about how you increase your emotional awareness in that experience. So here is what my acronym is. It is face everything and rise, right? But sometimes we do it all at the same time when we face literally everything, and it becomes overwhelming, because fear can be overwhelming, right? Anxiety can be overwhelming, but you have to literally put one foot in front of your other to deal with every mountain. As Dr. T said a few minutes ago about the reference to mountains, right? Sometimes the mountain is you. And when you look at what we're doing with mountains, it says in the scripture clearly, right, Pastor JT, if you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And many of us have to recognize that some of these dangers seen and unseen, some of these fear issues we're dealing with, it's been dealt with before. And so when I make the reference to faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. What we have to understand is that people have been moving mountains by faith for a long time. And so just be patient with yourself. Give yourself space and grace to go from a sound mind to loving the space you're in so you can have power to exist.
I'm going to ask Pastor JT to just jump right on in there.
Yes, and he gave me that alley-oop. I normally reference different versions of the Bible because it gives us a little bit more deeper insight into the scripture. And when you look at that same scripture, when we think about sound mind, in some translations, that phrase sound mind is self-discipline.
Yes.
There's a quote by Arnold Glasgow that says that fear is the lengthened shadow of ignorance. What that suggests is that oftentimes we're fearful because we're not prepared, which goes back to the space of being real with who you are, being real with where you are, and even being real with where you are attempting to go. I think because we have been forced in this social media vacuum, so to speak, we live in such delusional worlds that we actually create fear because we are attempting to be something that realistically we have never even been destined to be. So I honestly believe that in that space, I think that if we identify that first, I love the way doctors, Bishop, talked about fear. He didn't give it to us. And I've always said that if he didn't give it to us and we're operating in it, there are a lot of Christian atheists that are walking around in the world. We are declaring one thing, but we are delivering something else. And until we deal with that thing, we will be weighed down when we actually should be flying.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Terry with Bailey to comment on this because one of the bishops says, face everything and rise. How have you been able to rise as you've dealt with fear?
This is just so deep and so powerful that I'm just still soaking all of this in that I'm learning even today. And, you know, I don't like to even use the word fear. As one of the doctors, Bishop, shared, I use different terminology, you know, nervousness or anxiety. The only thing that I allow myself to even use the word fear with is snakes. I am deathly afraid of snakes. I just can't get past it. But other things, I have levels of anxiety. Maybe I am frozen. I like to use that word a lot. I don't even want to use that word fear in my terminology. And so trying to rise above the term that we'll use today of fear, for me, is taking one step at a time. If I feel like today is going to be a tough day for me, my first step, and I've shared this before with your viewers, my first step is actually making my bed. And that may sound trivial to some of your viewers, but for some people, that's an accomplishment to say, okay, I've made it that far. I've made my bed. That's my grounding. If I can get to that point, that means I've gotten out of the bed, that I put my feet on the floor, that I'm ready to walk to the other side of the bed. So I have movement that's happening. And so for me, if I can get that accomplished, what can I do next? Where can I go next? How can I make that next step? And it might sound trivial, but for some people, and in my case, I'm going to speak for myself, sometimes I have to start that simple, getting to that point to get out of the bed, to make those steps, to know that God is with me, but in my humanness, and I always want to say that, in my humanness, I allow myself to get burdened by things that weigh me down and that cause me anxiety and nervousness. So for me, it's taking those first steps, whether it's, you know, just certain things that happen in my home before I leave. It's getting in the car, connecting to the right kind of music, putting those things that are going to feed me into my system, whether it's the right type of nourishment, whether it's the right type of music, whether it's calling the right person. So knowing that I don't need the negativity or the bad things to fill me, because I can't rise above it. it will weigh me further down. So making those right decisions one at a time, because you can't do it all, or at least I can't. I can't do it all at once. I do it one step at a time.
I appreciate you saying doing each thing one at a time. We're going to go into our break and come back at the top. We're going to start with Dr. Tierney, because one of my overcomings related to fear, the exercise that I do with most of my clients, and it is snakes, Dr. Whit Bailey. I think it's important that people begin to determine where they are in response to and in relationship with the thing that brings them anxiety, whatever it is, because there's certain things we have to discover how to conquer and suppress internally before we can show up externally. So when we come back after the break, we're going to talk a little bit about another acronym for fear, which is to filter each action relationally. Where are you in context with the thing that you are dealing with? We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds. As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shootings. We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, we are discovering not only what our fears are, but how to take them, like anything else, one bite at a time, one step at a time, giving us opportunity and space to give ourselves grace, but also to grow. I want to start with Dr. Tierney, because sometimes we don't know how to filter how we feel about the things that we are facing. And oftentimes, having this level of relationship that we have with fear is good. It can be healthy, I think, Dr. Tierney, to allow ourselves to really grapple with, as Dr. Whit Bailey said, with the emotions that she has, as Dr. Jennifer said, being able to put a label on it and give it a name so we can call it for what it is. Talk to us about that in this process that we have to go through in order to grow.
Absolutely. So fear is so important that I literally dedicated an entire chapter in my book to it, just to talk about it, because it's one of those things that'll quickly get us stuck, and so that we can't get to our goals and we can't reach that next level. But as we are assessing our relationship with fear, I think it's important that we also understand what type of fear we're talking about. So fear is a natural response. It's a natural physical response that we were given in order to help keep us safe. It's that healthy skepticism. So as Dr. Bailey was talking about that snake on the ground, well, there are some snakes that she does need to make sure that she does not touch, So in our ancestral days, when we were, nomadic and living outside amongst the elements and amongst the animals, we needed to have that healthy skepticism of our environment to make sure that we stayed safe. Now, that type of fear is one that definitely helps to keep us safe. So we're not speaking about necessarily that fear, okay? But it's important that we understand the difference between that fear and then the spirit of fear that we've been assessing earlier. That spirit of fear, that's that psychological fear. That's that fear of the unknown. That's that fear of the what if. That's that fear of am I enough? It's that fear, that internal fear, that fear that's really not real, that we are generating ourselves from an internal place. We have to make sure that we understand what type of fear are we talking about. you know. And once we understand the type of fear that we're talking about, then we can properly address it and we can properly use it for our benefit and keep it from standing in front of us. So for example, I had a client that told me, I am afraid of dogs. I'm afraid of dogs. I am so afraid of dogs. I'm so afraid of dogs. As she was saying this, she was actually petting my dog. As she's telling me she's so afraid of dogs, but she's petting my dog. And I stopped and I said to her, do you realize that you're petting my dog? And she looked and was like, oh my goodness, but I am so afraid of dogs. You know, there was a past traumatic incident in her past that she then learned and taught herself that I am afraid of dogs. Dogs are bad. But she was petting my dog because somewhere along the way, she'd actually moved past that, but she kept the same narrative without actually allowing her emotions and her life experiences past that point to catch up so that she can learn, oh, dogs really aren't that bad. It's not, I don't have to be afraid of dogs anymore. So we have to take that moment to stop and say, okay, is this something that I'm telling myself, that I've been telling myself on a loop because of a situation that happened, because of something that transpired, that now I've just kept that same energy. And so now I've made that fear into a part of me, a piece of me that is now standing in my way. Is that something I need to go back and assess? Am I still afraid of dogs? Is that something that I need to have that healthy skepticism for? Or is this something that the enemy has tried to use to block me, to stand in my way so that I'm not able to really reach the goals that I want and I'm just keeping it on the loop and don't even recognize it? So when we're looking at our relationship with fear, we have to understand what that fear is, why it is, and then do the necessary steps in order to unravel that fear so that we can move forward.
I think that that's vitally important as you're talking. I want to ask Pastor JT to come into this conversation because oftentimes switching that narrative in our head is not always that easy. Pastor JT, how do we get people to change the narrative, that negative self-talk, that personal criticism that is constantly there because we've heard other people say to us, like Dr. Tierney said, you're not enough, the self-fulfilling prophecy, or your parents were nothing and you're not going to ever be anything. How do we escape those things and change the narrative?
I think one of the things that's extremely important, and I say this, and my sister has always said this, is that we need people in our lives that are coaches. I think sometimes it's hard for us to find that thing on our own. I think it's hard sometimes for us to look in the mirror and really be honest with ourselves because it's just something innately in us that we're always going to find an excuse of why. There are some grown people right now that will tell another grown person, that's just the way I am. You're just going to have to deal with it. And unfortunately, that caps them because there are some people that's not going to deal with that. So I think the first thing that has to happen, even as it relates to dealing with that negative self-talk, you have to allow somebody the space to come into your life to challenge you to go back to that place and identify when was the first time that you heard something negative about yourself. I believe that there was one show that we were on and we talked about, it was a financial show and it talked about our spending habits. And I think the age was 6 or 7. And I believe that it was discovered that many of us are in our 40s and 50s, but we're still behaving like we're 6 or 7 with our financial spending. Do you know there are some adults right now in there now? They're still living out of the brokenness that happened as a child. And so then it even makes it hard for them to accept something positive for somebody else, because now they start to look at that person who's speaking positively in them as to possibly thinking that this person has an angle. Dr. Tierney said something that was so key. She talked about a cycle, and some of us have placed ourselves in a cycle unknowingly that we perpetuate fear in ways that we will create a fearful experience even when it's not there, because we are used to things being a certain way. So I think it goes back to us identifying where was that first negative experience, but then also, and I believe that this is key as well, we have to be mindful of our circle, because we may have some fear mongers in our circle, that is causing us to have fear unnecessarily. It's just like if somebody else has a fear and they will that fear on you. One of the acronyms, if I can throw my acronym out there for fear, it's false emotions appearing real. Whose emotion have you attached to your life that now you are afraid of something that before you encountered them, that wasn't your testimony? Somebody else was afraid of heights. You've never been on the 11th floor. So why now, when somebody else who'd been on the 11th floor got scared, they came down and told you how fearful they were, and you're afraid now to go to the 11th floor when your destiny really is supposed to be on the 20th floor? But you have allowed somebody else's fear to become yours. And we have a lot of people right now that are living an imposter's life because they have limited themselves to live out the fear of somebody else.
I think that's an excellent segue, Pastor JT, because I was coming to the bishops about projection and the way that projection often puts us in spaces where we were never meant to be or destined to be. And Pastor JT said it well. You know, John Maxwell talks about the law of the lid, and oftentimes we are here in this space and the highest we can go is here, but we need to be up here. But somewhere someone has said something to us. Maybe we got too many no's, or, someone slapped our hand one time too many, or a door was shut in our faces, or people said something ugly to us. And we often cut ourselves short. And I think Jennifer Bishop said this maybe a few weeks ago, that sometimes we abort our plan before we actually get to the thing we're meant to be doing. Talk to us about that, bishops.
I think Dr. Tierney said this a couple of shows ago, but I too went skydiving. It was something I had to do. I just had to do it. And so when I boarded the plane and we were taking off, people were asking me, "Are you afraid? Are you scared?" And I said, "No, I just want to do it. Let's go." And so it was a tandem type skydive. And even the person who was videographing and even the person I was going to do the tandem with, he said, "Are you nervous yet? Are you scared?" And I said, "No, let's jump out the plane right now. I'm ready to go." And so they, in that moment, and I don't know why, jumping out of a plane at 16,000 feet above the ground didn't terrify me, but it didn't. And I did not allow other person's projection of what should be terrifying to be on me, so that I did not jump out and do what I wanted to do, what was innate in me that I needed to do. And so what Pastor JT was saying earlier is paramount to all of this. The projection of other person's fear could be transferable if we take it in, if we ingest it. And you have to have that guard up that says, "That's not mine, that's yours. Mm-hmm. You keep that. It has nothing to do with me." Mm-hmm. Last thing I'll say is, I was listening to this young lady speak, and she said that she has a son who was just petrified of E.T. He had watched the movie, he was scared of it. And he thought E.T. was in her bathroom, was in a tub. Well, that was the only bathroom they had, so he had to go take a bath. Well, the mother finally said to the little boy, "E.T. is not real. That is not a fear that you need to have, because it is a fictional character. It is not real." So going back to the persons that you have around you, those persons who have experience in what we are afraid of, when we have that relationship with them, and that they can let us know what is real and what's not real and how to overcome it if we do face it, that is an important relationship to have. So perception and projection is critical, and making sure you have the right circle around you is paramount.
I've been jumping at the bit to get to this conversation because I'm going to say this quickly, and then I'm going to unpack it. In order to grow through it, you got to go through it, right? And so when you mentioned about snakes earlier, I want to tell you something about snakes, because you got to go from a fear zone to a learning zone to a growth zone. And so imagine at the bottom of the mountain, that's the fear, right? Then by mid-level, you have the learning zone, but the peak of the mountain is the growth zone. Well, here's the truth about snakes. On every mountain, there's a snake line where snakes can't breathe at that elevation. And so when you're dealing with fear or snakes in your life, symbolically, you may be getting to a level where it's a rare air, or where you're projected to go has become such a divine assignment or just a special opportunity that snakes are your last part of your climb. And so when I look at even what we are dealing with as trauma that is infused on our life, people have told us we wouldn't be anything, or people told us that we couldn't do something, right? that fear or that anxiety or that nervousness that comes across at that challenge may be something you're dealing with at the bottom of the mountain, but learn yourself, affirm yourself. So as you grow through it, you go through it, because what you're literally doing is elevating your thoughts, elevating your mindset, because you're literally going from a fixed mindset, because fear has been fixated in your life, to a growth mindset. And literally your growth mindset deals with your prefrontal context, when you think with the forefront of your mind to look for a new opportunity, a new way, where 2 + 2 may not just equal 4, because that's the fixed mindset. That's the back of the mind. That's how you've been programmed. That's how you've been wired. But maybe 2 + 2 is 22, which means it's a different perspective, a different way you look at something, because you're growing through your learning experience. You're getting past the snake line, and now you're breathing rare air.
When we come back after the break, I want to talk to Dr. Terry Wood Bailey about that, because she said she was afraid of snakes and she may have to get past her snake line. But a part of that is another one of my favorite acronyms that helped me overcome related to fear. And it was literally facing and factoring in experiences and accepting responsibility. Sometimes it is you, and you got to figure out what you need to do, how your life experiences can propel you forward so that you can move on. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And you have heard a lot of acronyms today, and I hope that you found one that fits and suits you. I want to talk to Dr. Whit Bailey about how we can accept responsibility, looking back at all of our life experiences in order to build a toolkit related to attacking fear and anxiety and all of those other things that seem to keep us from moving forward. Hey, Dr. Terry Whit Bailey.
Hey, you know, if I lived in the city where the bishop live, I would be a member of their church. I am just being so well fed with what they're sharing today. And I didn't know anything about that snake line. And maybe there are other viewers out there that have a different fear. So yeah, we'll talk about the snake thing and that going above that line. And yeah, I think that is true. I think that my paralysis happens at that level, at where the snakes are. And yes, I had a traumatic experience as a young girl, and it went along with me as I've become an adult. But where has that stopped me? And we can use that figuratively. Where have I stopped in terms of my growth as a Christian, as a woman, as a professional? What is stopping me? Now, I'm not saying that I'm a perfect person and I have all the answers. That's why I'm so glad that I'm on this podcast with everyone else, because I'm learning too. So what do I need to do in order to get beyond that, and to know that if I go above that, what I was afraid of is now behind me or below me? And so that was a great analysis, and thank you, Dr. Aaron, for sharing it that way. What is it that I need to do to step over or step beyond or step above so that I can get that behind me in whatever it is that I'm dealing with, in this issue of, being a new widow? What am I freezing with? What am I afraid of? In my case right now, it's trying to figure out what to do with the 5,000 square foot house that I live in by myself now. What do I do with it? How do I figure this out? How do I take that next step? How do I rise above it? How do I get those people that will help me, not the people that will hurt me or that will bring additional fear into my life? How do I get those people to help me to go that next step, to get beyond it, so I can get things packed or moved or adjusted? How do I do that? And so finding the right people, increasing my faith, but not just sitting still, standing up and taking those first steps and trying to make that difference for me personally, while others are even watching me, as a professional and as a woman of God, a person who lives in a small town. I know that there are people that are watching me. As a administrator in the work that I do, there are people that are always watching us and seeing how we get through, not how we get stuck. Well, they're watching that too, but how do we get through it? How are we making a difference? How are we getting beyond it? So thank you for that, because that's helping me. That's helping me to know that it's time to take that next step. It's time to put that behind me or under me or away from me so that I can move on. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I think this is a family question. So I'm going to ask everybody this question, and let's roundtable a little bit for our audience today. How do you get to growth? Whether it's how you know you're there, how do you know you can move forward? When do you take time to take another leap of faith? Dr. Tierney, talk to us about that. Yeah, I'm gonna start with you.
I wanted to think. So the first thing when we're thinking about growth, we have to look at it from our own perspective. We can't look at growth through somebody else's lens. We can't look at it and say, look at their life. Like I can't look at, the doctors, bishops and go, oh, well, my growth is, see, when they got there, then when I get there, like that's the quickest way to stunt your growth, because you're trying to compare your process, your growth, your purpose with someone else's, so we have to first just look at yourself, and focus, keep your eyes on your own paper to then think about, what does growth mean to me? Where is it that I want to go? How am I uniquely qualified? What is my gifts, talents, purpose, and then look at, all right, am I moving the needle forward? As Dr. Bailey said, some days it might mean that I got out of the bed today and I made the bed. That's growth. Sometimes it may be that, okay, this month I lost 1 pound. That's growth. So keeping that measuring stick in perspective so that we're not looking at growth from these huge leaps and jumps. Sometimes growth is just a baby step. And ultimately, when you look back over your life, over the course of the last year or 5 years, being able to see where you have moved the needle forward in your life, in your walk, in your progress, according to your goals, not somebody else's.
Absolutely. Pastor JT.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I want to just say ditto. But one of the things that I would add is, I believe growth, especially in my lens, growth to me looks like how quick I got back up. Mm-hmm. Because I think understanding growth, you don't, as Dr. Bishop said, you don't get to that space without growing through it. And for some of it, it's not Instagram worthy. It's ugly. It's not. I'm not even thinking about no camera at that point. Right. But I'm struggling. I'm straining. But the Bible promises me that even though I fall, I can get back up again. Mm-hmm. But this is the thing about growth. I'm getting back up with a new mind, because I didn't know what I just failed in. And now as I got up, I realized, man, it didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen. But now I'm stepping up and I'm even better than I am now, because I think about the today Jamel in comparison to the Jamel 20 years ago. The Jamel 20 years ago couldn't even embrace the season that Jamel is in now, because I hadn't grown yet. But I think about all of the losses that I had to turn into learns in that 20-year period. I think about all of the people I had next to me that I thought had my best interests, but really wanted my light. But now, as I have gotten to this place, it makes me prepared for this level, knowing that even the next step may be a step that I have to push a little bit harder. But as long as I have that fortitude to get back up, that's growth. And just challenging myself to be better today than I was yesterday, that's growth all within itself.
Wow, I think that's powerful. And our audience begins to, attach themselves to some of this positive affirmation, that we're giving today. Dr. Bishop.
Growth for me is recognizing that I didn't respond to something that happened the way I could have responded or used to respond.
Amen.
That is a tremendous measure stick of growth, because it took a lot to get to the place where you don't respond and you want the maturity that you knew could be there, but you weren't ready to go there. And then one day it just settles on you. Yeah. And then you grow from that to the next level, but you celebrate every step of growth that you have and understand, and sometimes envelop the experiences that took you to the place where you can say that I have grown, and I'm glad that you met me today instead of yesterday. That's an important part of the process for me, and for the person that I'm becoming, because I also recognize, Dr. Tierney said it, who you see today is not who you're going to see tomorrow. I'm growing right now, being a part of this conversation. And the woman that she is tomorrow will not be the woman she is a couple of weeks from there. And so not settling as well, or thinking that you're about to plateau and this is the place that you're supposed to stay at. There's always going to be a growth process. And in there comes uncertainty, anxiety, but there also should be the will to keep pushing forward. Fight through the fear, the anxiety, whatever you want to label it as, but you got to keep going.
And here's my my thoughts. With growth, there's only two things, two dynamics to it for me. Either you prepare for growth or you repair from growth. So every day you wake up, make up your mind or make a decision to either prepare or repair, because growth is going to happen. It's part of life. I mean, if it's not, then why are these gray hairs on my chin, right? It was there years ago. If it's not, why am I bald headed now? I used to have an afro, right, JT? We used to have hair on our head, right? And so growth is a part of life. And if you don't prepare for it, you won't be ready for it. Because if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So here's what Marianne Williamson said. She said, our biggest fear is not that we're inadequate. The biggest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure, which means you'll get blessed from your growth, that you won't have room enough to handle it, right? But in repairing from growth, you'll get to a place where you are like, it was painful, but it was worth it. I got past the snake line.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know if I said this before, but one of the exercises that I do with my clients is working with snakes. And the reason that I'm bringing this up again is because it deals with the role that trust plays, because oftentimes we think we have to go through all of it by ourselves, but you have to figure out how and who to bring alongside you. And in the time that we have left, I'm going to ask each of you to share, what is it that you look for when you can trust someone, or you're looking to trust someone to come alongside you to help you overcome the things that you are facing. Start with Pastor JT.
Wow. The thing that I look for is if they've gone through something and come out of it. Because as we continue to go through life, we're going to always find those things that we have to go through. But you got to have somebody next to you that has gone through it as well, and you can both push through.
Absolutely. Dr. Wynn Bailey.
Well, you know, as a woman of faith, there's something about what God does and how God puts somebody in your life. And in my mature age, for me, I know when it's happening, and I know that's not the answer that you want, but things will happen. I was at a dinner one evening, and I was sitting next to a woman. We were both there by ourselves, and we struck up a conversation and realized that we needed each other. And after we met that day, we realized, and we said, God brought us together. We both realized that. So for me, it's important to make sure that somebody has a God connection. I'm at I'll call it a vulnerable place in my life right now, just trying to get, my equilibrium, trying to figure out life right now. So I need to be around people that understand the power of the word, the power of God, and that are willing to take risks, but through faith.
I think that's well said, because it may not be what I was looking for, but it was definitely probably something that someone needed. Sometimes it's connection, that builds trust. And with that, I'm going to ask the bishops to give a word, and then Dr. Tierney, and then we'll be on to my reflection.
What Dr. Terry said exactly what I was thinking. And for me, I look for whether or not their presence is precious. Is your presence precious to me? Does it make me better? Does it make me want to be stronger and better than I thought I could? Does it bring out something in me? And not to be selfish, I look and ask and wonder, do I do the same thing? And that's when we can walk together, because 2 or 3 have agreed. So we can go forward together. So it's not just me getting and them not receiving. It's a relationship that is built. And so just like, again, Dr. Terry said that they conferred and said that there was something that was ordained by God to bring them together. And so that's important. Is your presence precious?
I just need someone to have empathy for me as I go through my growth season, even my learning season, right? Because when I look at what I am going through, I need someone to understand that in the poetic expression of Tupac Amaru Shakur, that I may be the rose that grew through the concrete. That it took a lot for me to get here. And in this space where I'm learning from my fear and growing through my fear, I survived. I've survived snake bites. I've survived grizzly bear attacks. Because as I go up that mountain of fear, I'm gonna get to the mountaintop. So just have empathy for me as I grow.
Absolutely, Dr. T.
And I'm gonna springboard right off of that and say that the thing that I look for in terms of trusting someone, I look for emotional intelligence and wisdom. As Pastor JT said earlier, sometimes we'll get stuck in our 6-year-old selves. You'll be 46, but really a 6-year-old. So I look for making sure that person has that wisdom. We may not have gone through the exact same things, but you may have a level of wisdom that I need to lean into, that emotional intelligence that lets me know you know how to handle me. When I'm being in my vulnerable state or unpacking my bags, are you going to take my bag and twirl it around your head, or are you going to show that compassion and that empathy, even if it's something that you've never necessarily walked through, but you have that wisdom and that emotional intelligence to be able to handle me appropriately and love me through whatever the season is, and vice versa, that I'm able to reciprocate that, for you. So that's one of the main things that I look for, or 2 of the main things that I look for: wisdom and emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for sharing those wisdom tidbits with our audience. When we come back, I'll give my reflection.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, overcoming the things that we face can often lead us to a space of anxiety, being paralyzed, not knowing which direction to turn. But one thing that we've discovered today is that we do not go this journey alone. There are people who are out there who are willing to help us when we get to the space of knowing that we're ready for help. But in addition to that, there's some things that we learn that allow us to really accept and understand and identify that fear is false evidence appearing real. When we weigh it against our life experiences, against the ways in which we've been bolstered forward, the accomplishments and the achievements that we have, then we know that we can accomplish that which we set out for. And there are times that fear is real because our memory does not allow us to forget, if you will, those things that gave us anxiety, that paralyzed us. But fear shouldn't hinder us. It oftentimes can propel us to be able to move forward. I hope that something that we have said today, one of the many F.E.A.R. acronyms that you have heard, you will put them in your balanced living toolkit and allow them to propel you forward. Thank you everyone for watching. Bye now.